today is Eric Richmond. He is a securities lawyer and the chief legal officer, correct? As well as the
General
head of
counsel.
BD, general counsel and head of BD at Shakepay. He is also the co-founder of Tetra Trust, which I am very interested in speaking with you about today. Welcome, Eric.
Thank you for having me. Good to be here.
Yeah, yeah, no, it's good for you and I to like get to do this on the record for once, and we'll see if that's any different than when we see each other at like consensus, you know?
Yeah. Maybe it'll be
Uh,
spicier.
Maybe it'll be spicier, maybe less so. I kind of want to start at the beginning. Like you started your career as a securities lawyer, correct?
Yeah.
And is it fair to assume that as a securities lawyer at the time, and maybe you can place us like in terms of when that was, but like that you were sort of starting to bump up against crypto and starting to kind of get some exposure to the different people in the ecosystem? Is that kind of what drove the next leg of the journey for you?
Yeah. Yes. This goes back to probably, I discovered crypto in 2016. I was a securities lawyer at Blake Castles of Graydon, which is a large law firm in Toronto based on Bay Street. Um, and I started to discover that there was this new technology, this new way of paying people and the store of value. And I really started to read up on it. It was right at the cusp of like the Ethereum sort of like boom. This was early 2017, and then into the ICO boom. And so it was a really good time to be a corporate securities lawyer because securities law really meshes well with, and it's really like one of the only industries that really meshes really well with crypto, because of all these new tokens and new issuances and stuff. And so I was able, as a young associate at the law firm that I was at Blake's, to become sort of the resident expert in crypto. I was able to take advantage of that and sort of would have prospective clients come in, or current clients come in asking them if they want how can they can do their token offerings and help them through that. And then broadened to other areas within the crypto space as well.
Yeah, it makes sense to me that the entry point for most legal professionals into the industry would have been through the securities lens, and I think that still rings true today. I suspect that is that fair? Is a lot of the work that you're doing inside of somewhere like ShakePay mostly relevant to securities law and securities regulation as opposed to other places like payments, for example?
Yeah. Today, yes. And that's because our securities regulators have been the most active in the space in Canada in terms of regulating the space. The other regimes, like the call it the federal government, the provincial government, in particular the federal government, which typically regulates payments, have been less active in this space, and so because of that, there's just less to do there. I do foresee we're at a point now, especially with, and I'm sure we'll get into this, with the stablecoin bill going through the U.S. House and process there. I do foresee a point in time here in the near future where we will have something similar in Canada, some sort of regime or something else on how we regulate stablecoins here. But right now, it's really just been the securities regulators that have regulated the crypto space at the moment.
Yeah. Yeah, that's. I mean, this is my observation as well, although I wouldn't speak to it as eloquently as you from the legal perspective. One of the things that I noted in an earlier conversation was just that even back then when you were practicing securities law, like I remember part of my first introduction to crypto was really the remittance use case that we've seen sort of boomerang all the way
Right.
back today to being sort of the the core focus of the industry, if you will. Um, is that is that accurate? Like you were there remittance use cases
Oh yeah.
alongside sort of the securities practice that you had looked at the time, and did that play a part in your interest in crypto, or were you looking at it through a securities lens then?
Yeah, no, that's the business you're sort of alluding to, which was a huge interest to me. It was a business that it was called Paycase. It was a business that uh, took funds in Canada, so you had your Canadian dollars, converted it to Bitcoin. You would then send the Bitcoin to another wallet, typically to the Philippines, where at merchants they were able to then convert the funds from Bitcoin back to the Filipino pesos. And so instead of them using Western Union, taking a lot of fees, you were just essentially using Bitcoin to do that. And you didn't need to didn't need to worry too much about price fluctuation at the time because the transfer between cash or fiat to Bitcoin was happening sort of instantaneously. So really, at the end of the day, it was essentially like a stable coin, how a stable coin is today in a way of at least the use of it. And that was really cool. Like it was like, okay, there's no other way to pay someone. I'm sure if anyone has sent a wire to really anyone, domestically and then internationally, it's a complete disaster in terms of fees and time. Like this was to me like, wow, that was a um, huge unlock that I was like, this is really the future here of where we're going on from a payments infrastructure perspective. And then I think stablecoins has just sort of like accelerated that timeline, and we're sort of in a place now where like I think we're on the precipice here of like some real transformative changes in our payments infrastructure, which will hopefully be leveraging blockchain technology to do that.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, to reference your earlier point about the Genius Act in the United States, and just some of the things that the Bank of Canada has done to bring more payment service providers under their purview, and it almost feels like we've taken some steps towards the regulatory structures that would be required to support additional development of the stablecoin ecosystem. Funny enough, Joseph Weinberg, the CEO of Paycase, he helped me buy my first Bitcoin in 2016. I was working for a
Nice.
company that I still have many friends, from that time, and there was four or five of us, and he helped us buy our first Bitcoin in either 2015 or 2016, and then he left to start Paycase. And I think to your point, like that really opened up like the aperture of the opportunity for me, right? Like it really cemented for me like the art of the possible, because while waiting for block confirmation times of 10 to 15 minutes is suboptimal, you could see that the obvious benefits of being able to move value on these open networks were going to eventually outweigh the drawbacks that existed 10 years ago, and many of those problems have been solved. Like I used Base this morning to move money, and it cost me a penny and took 5 seconds, which was pretty incredible.
Yeah.
So I want to kind of I want to keep talking about those first couple of steps out of your legal practice. So you'd spent some time at CoinSquare, and most people in Canada that are interested in this space, and certainly everybody that got interested in it back when you and I did, has likely been a CoinSquare user. CoinSquare, correct me if I'm wrong, was the first regulated crypto exchange in Canada.
It was the first regulated zero dealer crypto native platform, yes, in Canada.
Regulated crypto native platform. That's a nice way to say that, actually. And talk to us a little bit about like that moment in the journey where the interaction with regulators must have been like quite collaborative, and nobody had really carved this path before. Were we following a pattern that other markets had already followed? We were building our own pattern at that time and thinking about it from first principles. Like what was happening that made that possible?
Well, I mean, unfortunately, the part that probably woke up the securities regulators to do something about the industry was a bad event. Was Quadriga, which when I joined CoinSquare in late 2017, there were two exchanges at the time in Canada that you can buy crypto on. There was Quadriga, and then there was this like up and coming platform CoinSquare. Quadriga, you tried calling them, and like you didn't even know like you couldn't even find a number, and sure enough they only had like one to two employees there. um, and CoinSquare was growing, right? It was just in Toronto where I was based. I think at that point in time it had like 20, 30 employees, and And so, I joined CoinSquare. Um, but yeah, unfortunately, the regulators, the securities regulators in particular, had to do something about Quadriga because that was a big stain for them and for the industry. And so that's where they started creating the rules and the framework that we have today for crypto trading platforms, which is essentially the way they regulate crypto trading platforms in Canada is they say if you are a custodial trading platform like Shakepay today or CoinSquare today or whatnot or Quadriga back then, um, you're not like the Bitcoin that you are custodying on behalf of of your users is essentially an IOU, and that IOU itself is a security. So they call it a crypto contract, and that crypto contract is a security. So even though Bitcoin itself, Ethereum itself, the regulation said is not a security, because of the custodial nature of it, they deem it a security. So that's how the regulators sort of wrap their hand around the space, the securities regulators in particular. How Coinsquare sort of came to its way, like it was not an easy route. Coinsquare was the first, I guess the crypto native part is true, but they were also the first marketplace as well. So a marketplace is regulated by the OSC and then the other securities commissions across the country, and then and then CIRO or IROC previously regulates the dealer function. So Coinsquare received both the marketplace license and the CIRO dealer license. And yeah, you're very much fitting a square peg into a round hole. This was the framework that the regulators created was not a bespoke regulatory framework where it was based off of like consultation with industry and you know it's very much square peg round hole. So there was a lot of back and forth and work and what exemptions are required to get this through the door. But ultimately we were able to make it happen. But it took a while to make it happen. Now, fortunately, we've seen a few other platforms able to get those licenses as well, and Shakepay, I think record time in my books at least, able to get that zero dealer license, which is pretty exciting.
I'm glad you brought this back to Shakepay because I think that's it's a good way to investigate what the world looked like when CoinSquare was going through this and helping regulators sort of understand how a crypto trading platform or a marketplace would need to be regulated to be most effective and to achieve the policy outcomes of whatever law they're responsible for the oversight of. But ShakePay just recently received its Zero dealer license. Prior to that, had been a restricted dealer. Is that accurate?
Yep, yeah, that's right. Yeah,
Eh, eh,
Shakepay got his license in January of this year.
Congratulations on that.
Yeah, thank you.
Well, and that unlocked something really interesting that you announced only a couple of weeks ago, which is that you are now a member of Payments Canada, you ShakePay.
Yeah, we're a member of Payments Canada, which is really exciting. We're the first crypto company to be a member of Payments Canada, and I guess the third fintech. And it's really exciting to be in those conversations with the, predominantly the banks and credit unions, talking about the future of Canada's payment rails. And then I think we bring a very unique perspective. Like, we operate in essentially a real time payment world today. And so the risk that's involved and the things that we see could be very relevant to what Payments Canada is doing today on like their real time rail approach, right? Because I think there's a lot of learnings and teachings that we can provide because we essentially in crypto are operating in a 24/7 real time movement of funds, which has a lot of parallels to what the RTR network and everything they're trying to produce in Canada. So I'm very excited about that membership.
Yeah, certainly. And I think, because some piece of your business does operate on real time infrastructure today, meaning, you send and receive value to and from public blockchains, yet some component of your business, namely like the treasury management component, is still batch processed where presumably you're holding float at various institutions and market makers and figuring out how to marry the real-time experience that you're providing to users with the realities of connecting to the traditional financial system, which operates on sort of a batch settlement process.
Yeah, yeah, no, that's exactly right. It's there's a lot of interesting parallels there between the two, and that's why I think we can provide some pretty interesting insights for Payments Canada and the groups there.
Without question, yeah, I think that's it, right? Like you have experience in marrying those two speeds, those two settlement speeds, and ultimately everybody's going to have to do that as we transition more and more of our payment flows to real time.
Yeah, and then the hiccups involved, right? Like if you're dealing with the batch system as an example, right? There are a lot of chargebacks, and you got to be worried about like certain fraudulent actions that can happen, within those payment rails, and how that all impacts your overall business. On the other side, where you have like something that's moving a lot quicker, right? So there's a lot of interesting things there that I think where we can provide some value.
And Shakepay, maybe it's useful for you to just help help me understand in your words, like, where did Shakepay come from? Why does Shakepay exist? And then how did it get to where it is here over the last sort of whatever chapter of the Shakepay story has covered the last couple of years? Because it's a very different business today than it would have been 5, 6 years ago.
Definitely. And Shakespeare's actually been around for 10 years now.
Whoa.
So it actually started in 2015. It actually started as a Visa card that you can spend your crypto. And the founders at the time, it took them a while to figure this out, but they eventually came to a conclusion that I don't want to be spending my Bitcoin. And I think like, our Jean, the CEO of ShakePay, sometimes jokes that like if he looks back at some of those transaction records and the amount of Bitcoin he spent, it was like a lot of Bitcoin or a lot of dollar value of Bitcoin and a lot of Bitcoin. Um, but then, there was a sort of an awakening in 2018, 2019, where they sort of flipped it on its head. They're like, we want to create a card where you're spending your fiat dollars and earning Bitcoin back in interest because Bitcoin is, in our view, the best store of value. It will help Canadians generate long-term wealth just by holding this asset. And coincidentally, we're recording this on a day where Bitcoin has hit its all-time high, so that's pretty exciting. So
Yep.
that thesis is definitely held true, and my belief will continue to hold true as it is a deflationary asset. And so it's like, how do we get more Bitcoin in more Canadians' pockets? And so they flipped the model on its head in terms of having this Visa card that you can spend your fiat and earn rewards in Bitcoin. They then launched a crypto exchange, right, where you can buy Bitcoin with your fiat, buy ETH with your fiat, and then eventually have just fast forwarding a little bit to today's product, we offer everyday payment type services. We have a lot of traditional financial infrastructure products that Canadians be accustomed to that any fintech offers, things from the ability to deposit your check or deposit your paycheck directly right into ShakePay, the ability to pay your bills from ShakePay, the ability to the ability to even earn interest on the funds held at Shakepay. So we offer a really cool product today where we actually are paying you interest on the fiat that you hold with us, but we pay it back in Bitcoin. So again, it's to incentivize that sort of behavior of really um, how you can earn more Bitcoin by just being a ShakePay customer and using the products that we offer today. And so that's what ShakePay really is. It's really it's not a pure play crypto trading platform like the Coinbases, Krakens, or WonderFi's of the world. It's not really a pure play fintech either, like the Neos or symbols of the world. It sort of sits in the middle of all of this. It really brings the uniqueness of all those platforms together into a really simplified, easy to use experience for our users.
I mean, you brought up WonderFi, so I feel like we have to address that a little bit. Do you have any just like open thoughts on the Robinhood acquisition and like how do you when you get that news how do you interpret that either for yourself as an individual, as a customer, as a Canadian consumer, as a business leader at ShakePay, or even the industry? Like, is there sort of a gut reaction that you have to that news? Because a few other people I spoke to had gut reactions to it, that and they were good conversations.
Well, I guess there's two ways I can take it, and I guess you tell me which way you want me to take it. I can take it the Shakepay route, like what's it mean for Shakepay, the acquisition. I can also take it like the personal route as well, because like as you know, I was there for WonderFi got acquired
Yep.
by CoinSquare, and I was there for a long time. So I mean, I take both. Which one do you want me to start with?
I think your Shake Pay hat is the most important.
Okay, okay, yeah. I mean, so and this is also, I guess, sort of personal. It is exciting to see Robinhood come into Canada. I mean, I've not used their products in depth because as a Canadian, you can't really use their products. But from what I've seen, it's an amazing offering, an amazing experience. Um, I think all of that is really exciting. Robinhood is not just coming into Canada to be a crypto product. I think everyone recognizes that they definitely will have plans to offer their full suite of products. The full suite of products includes things like equities and everything else they offer today in the US. That will take time. It will take time for them to get the regulatory changes that they need with the regulators here and get that fully launched. It will be interesting to see if it can get it off the ground. Like I'm talking the full offering, not just the crypto side, because we've had a multiple large fintechs try to come into Canada and they've struggled with the regulatory framework. Like
Yeah.
ultimately, at the end of the day, you're doing the same amount of work in the US to be regulated there as you are here for 1/10 of the business. And so it's like, is it even worth it, right? At the end of the day. And I think that's what ends up happening with a lot of these fintechs. So it will be interesting to see if they follow through with it. But let's just go on the assumption that they do. They're successful in call it 2 years time. They have the full product suite here. They have the crypto products. They have the fintech. They have the equities products, and then they have maybe some payment features in there as well. I think that's really good for the Canadian market. Like I think that's good for ShakePay. I think the ones who should be the most worried are the banks. Like I think most of the funds that are being transferred into these products are people who are using the banks because their product offerings suck. Um, and that's beneficial to me as an individual who still has to rely on a lot of the big banks to have some of these services. And so that's where I think this isn't just a purely crypto play. I mean, like, if you're well simple, like, I don't think they're that like they're obviously concerned. It's a big player coming into, our smaller pond, but like, I still think the ones that should be the most worried because I think ultimately they have the most to lose are the big banks.
Without question. I mean, it's almost going to seem for folks like we spoke about this in advance, which we didn't. But this is exactly it, right? I think it accelerates fintech in Canada because
Yeah.
it is so clearly beneficial to the customer, and it has such a clear and unique value proposition just on the basis of if I go and onboard to Robinhood, I am now part of something that is bigger than the national boundary, right? Because now I'm a Robinhood user, and there's Robinhood users in the UK, and there's Robinhood users in the United States, and presumably I can send money between other Robinhood users globally, and
Yep.
maybe they'll just use stablecoins for that because it's going to be a lot easier, and it's just a book transfer anyways, right? And I think that has to accelerate the way that the banks engage with fintechs in Canada and engage with regulators, because ultimately it's a sign that we can't continue to control the ecosystem. It's going to spill out over borders. We're a global trading nation. We want to export our quality of life. We want to export our cultural values. We can't expect people to live in the walled garden of our financial ecosystem, right? And it's very clear that that walled garden, has some holes in it. And do we want to either go on offense and take advantage of this moment, or do we want to continue to try to be protectionist, both against non-national actors, but then also companies inside of our own borders, like ShakePay, that are providing a very clear and distinct value to Canadians.
Yeah. No, 100%. And I think like I do hope Robinhood is successful here in getting that full suite off the ground. Like it will challenge the banks to not stick to the status quo, right? And I think that's the biggest thing is that they're accustomed to is just being okay with the status quo. And that's ultimately like any fintech, any startup company, like knows that like status quo is bad. You always want to be, growing. And so I think that's something that hopefully like Robinhood, Shakepay, Wealthsimple, other large fintechs can continue to push change. So, Canadians ultimately can benefit from like the best products that are sort of out there.
Totally. And I personally don't think that it matters whether this acquisition and Robinhood's ultimate sort of outcome here is Costco or Target, right? Like they could pull a
Right.
Target, they could be in and out in 18 months because they didn't understand how to serve Canadians, or they could be, the Costco. And either way, it should result in the same change in terms of like our frame of mind around competition, and it should advance those goals for you and I and others in the fintech ecosystem. One of the things that is buried a little further underneath what consumers need, and the level of choice that we want to give consumers in terms of who provides them financial services is the infrastructure side of this thing. I had a conversation with somebody last week at Consensus, and I was just kind of reflecting on, Ethereum started here. Its very earliest days were a small group of people here in Toronto. The Ethereum Foundation talks now of a world where Ethereum is the sort of next gen global financial infrastructure. I share that view. And it's odd to me that we don't lean into job creation as a policy outcome, especially when we're talking about, again, the development of, the next generation global financial system. And that whole preamble was to get to something more concrete, which is I think it would surprise people to know how little of the digital asset balances in Canada are custodied in Canada. And you were the co-founder of Tetra Trust.
Yeah.
The first, can you explain what Tetra Trust is, and what like this was net new. This was something that hadn't been done before, that you helped to get off the ground, and I just want you to help me understand a little bit more about that.
Yeah. I mean, simply, and this actually goes back to 2018. At, at CoinSquare at the time, we were looking at the market and like, oh, we would love a Bitcoin ETF. And I think the Gemini brothers were trying to do a Bitcoin ETF in the US. And we're like, okay, how do we do a Bitcoin ETF? And you look at the securities requirements, like, oh, well, you need a qualified custodian to do that. Well, there are no qualified custodians to do that, and this was before BitGo was a trust company, Coinbase trust company. Like this was before all that. BitGo only became a trust company in I think middle of 2018, so this is prior to that as well. Um, and so yeah, we went out and sort of like, okay, how do we get Tetra off the ground and become Canada's first regulated trust company approved to custody digital assets in Canada? And it took us a while. Like, like I said, we started this in 2018 and Tetra got its license in July of 2021. So it was almost a 3-year
Yep.
process to get its license, and so now it's a regulated Alberta trust company that can operate across the country, and it's been growing steadily. It custodies some of the largest Bitcoin ETFs in the country. It just announced today that it's also custodying Wealthsimple's assets, and I think it's really important that. Oh, and I see
I did,
Jeremy's. I see your look there. Yeah,
I didn't see that.
and
I actually I
yeah, yeah, there you go. And I think it is really important, just like the the macroeconomic environment of what's going on right now. Like I think it is important to like have Canadian custody. And this wasn't even the thesis back then of Tetra. Like the thesis back then of Tetra was like, yeah, there's could be like for example, if something were to happen at Coinbase, who's going to be favored? Obviously, the Americans are going to be favored over the Canadian creditors in that situation. Um, but even more so now with like tariffs and all this stuff going on, it probably makes sense to have a Canadian custodian, even more so back then. And yeah, that's it's it's an exciting business, and yeah, it's great to see them just continue to grow.
That's incredible. So first qualified custodian in Canada, uh, likely, I mean, one of the required enablers of the Bitcoin ETFs, which were introduced in Canada before anywhere else, I believe. And then
Yep.
now the question for me, which, and I appreciate that context because I didn't have all of that, of course. That's why I asked the question. But it strikes me as important that Wealthsimple and potentially others would begin to custody assets on behalf of customers with these qualified custodians in Canada, because the only way we're going to have self-sufficiency in this new financial ecosystem is to own the infrastructure and have capabilities around it and people that know how to use it and people that can tune it for Canadian use cases and Canadian and Canadian regulation.
Yeah, no, exactly.
Um, in all of the things that we've spoken about, like the common thread is really this role of product and business development and legal in one. This
Yeah.
seems to be what you represent. Like, you spend a lot of time on product before product touches it? I'm guessing.
Yeah, yeah. No, that's essentially right. Like I sort of need to map out. I need to like I bring together the sort of the regulatory components. Like sort of here are your guardrails or your goalposts. Let's map out what's in the realm of possible. And I like to keep that as wide as possible while mapping that out to see what is possible, right? Because sometimes you can even like sometimes those goalposts you can go a little wider than you expect. Um, and yeah, so you have to think about like what is the best product with these goalposts in mind. And so that's why you sort of like at least roughly map it out. And then yes, definitely you work with like great product people to then like, everything in between basically to sort out.
Yeah, it's such a collaborative and on like it seems like there are fits and starts. Certainly in my experience, right? It's like your your interpretation of what is and is not allowed meets with product, and then you test the viability of it, and that cycle sort of tends to continue quite a bit because we're in a space where we are fundamentally trying to do things that maybe have patterns in the old world but haven't been done in precisely this way before, whichever it is, right? Can you maybe just expand on any of the times where that's been unsuccessful, where something just was not possible, or at least was not viable, even though you may feel like it could be viable in the future? Like, is there any sort of lessons learned that someone like myself, who's very purely product focused, would be would be able to learn from?
I mean, there's definitely a lot of frustrations along the lines with it. Like, I mean, the but I guess like this area is so evolving that even if you do end up hitting a roadblock, like don't stop. Basically,
Yeah.
is sort of the best advice I have. So even if like there's a few examples. There's a few I'll call it precedents that I would love for there not to be in the crypto
Hmm.
space, right? And actually, like in some respects, they actually specifically say in their exemption orders these are not precedents, but they sort of are precedents. It's sort of how it works in Canadian securities law. Like there'll be an exemption order, and even though literally it'll say in the exemption order this is not a precedent, like it sort of is, and it really is.
Yeah,
Um,
exactly.
you, yeah, you can like that's not the end game. Like there is still an availability to like work around that or work within that, like to go to create a framework that works within the current regulatory rules that we have in place. Um, because a lot of what we have today from a regulatory perspective, basically the entire crypto industry today is, I'll say, governed rule, or the rules are based off of staff notices.
Yes.
And like I can't even think of, like, there's very few bespoke or additional rules that are specifically targeted to the space. Everything is via staff notice. What a staff notice technically is interpretation of current rules.
Yep.
And so that's where it's like, even if you do come up against something that you might just fundamentally disagree with, like from a pure securities law perspective. And I think the thing that is probably the most relevant for you and for others on it who listen to this is what's going on with stablecoins in Canada, right? Like there's a big sort of right now, just summarize, right now in Canada, the regulators essentially are saying that stablecoins are securities. And so if you want to issue a stablecoin in Canada and you are a Canadian company, you need to issue a prospectus to do that. That's hugely problematic because if Eric, the individual Eric, wants to send Jeremy, the individual Jeremy, money, technically I'm sending you a security, which means that we both need to be registered or in some fashion as dealers to transact. Like that doesn't work for stablecoins, and that so it basically just kills the entire premise of stablecoins are for payments. Um, Now the regulators here, the securities regulators in particular, have said that this is an interim approach, and essentially they are asking for guidance from the federal government to properly regulate it. Like in their view, there are investor protection concerns that may need to sort of they need to sort of ensure are covered right now, while the federal government hopefully down the road comes up with something. But that's where it's like it's not a like if I'm a stablecoin issuer right now, I wouldn't be filing a prospectus because like it just basically is like your business is over. The
Yep.
second you before you even start, your business is over essentially, right? I'd be focusing on like how can I either get the CSA, the Canadian Securities Administrators, to change that position, but really you're trying to push the federal government, and then how you can get really the Minister of Finance and the now our Minister of Innovation, uh, how we can get them to sort of create policy that's positive for the space.
Yeah, yeah, certainly. And when you said, there aren't very many laws that have been passed in order to address crypto specifically, and of course, implicit in that statement is, however, we are seeing this in other markets now with MiCA, with the Genius Act in the United States, and then in the UK, the Chancellor of the Exchequer a few weeks ago at FinTech Week London, maybe 3 weeks ago, announced that they were going to table stablecoin legislation in the UK, and the primary policy objective for that is job creation in
Right.
London, so that London continues to be a hub and a center of excellence for digital asset innovation. That's the policy outcome they're looking for. So they're on offense now, right? Which I find very fascinating because I think that, the risks that we can see and observe tend to take most of our focus, but the risk of doing nothing is likely the bigger risk here. It's my concern is what we're giving up by not keeping pace with the rest of the world.
Exactly. Yeah. And I think we've already, unfortunately, done that, and we're in catch-up mode in Canada, particularly. Like, as you mentioned before, Ethereum founded in Canada, but the entire business is offshore. The developer, most of the developers, and but then everything else built on top of that. Um, and I think we have some catch-up to do. I am still like I feel very optimistic. I'm optimistic on Canada. I think having consensus in Toronto last week was very bullish. Like it was I think for the people, that are in government or other regulators coming to a conference like that, where they're like, "Wow, this is a real asset class. This is a real industry. Like, this was a 15,000 person conference within our largest convention center. Like, so I'm hoping that legitimacy can sort of like propel that thinking. Like there is a ton of jobs that unfortunately we've already lost. And the best crypto developers predominantly come from Waterloo, and they're all being, basically exported to the US and other countries. And so if we can find the right incentives to keep that talent here, and then have them create businesses, have other businesses stay here where they're incentivizing more jobs. Like this is really the things we should be talking about from like a policy perspective. I think really speak to the politicians in office. Um, and I think this is the messaging we need to get out as an industry to drive that change. Because if the messaging is just, hey, you know, regulate stablecoins because I like them, right? Like it just
Yeah.
doesn't really like resonate that well. Or like have a Bitcoin backed reserve. It's like, okay, but like it's not something that's gonna like matter to their constituents, right? What matters to their constituents is jobs, right?
Yes.
And so it's like if we can bring that back to that storyline, like the reason why the auto sector now is like one of the biggest things we hear about is because the amount of jobs there are associated with that. And so if we can bring that back to this story to like crypto results in more opportunity, more jobs, and more businesses here, like that's the messaging we should be trying to get out as an industry.
For sure. And why, if we ask why a few times, like, well, why do the auto jobs matter more than other jobs, so to speak? Well, because it's important for us to have advanced manufacturing capacity. Like, no one's going to argue with that. Should we have our own advanced manufacturing capacity in Canada? Yes. Do we want to develop that? Do we want to do R&D to support that? Absolutely. Should the same be true for the open global financial system? Yes. We should want to
Great.
play a role, and we should be. I'm just getting on a soapbox now. I invited you on so I could tell you all the things that you already know about me. Um, Talk to me about where the rubber hits the road here with Shakepay, though, right? Like from the perspective of stable coins and like what can we do as Shakepay users? What can Shakepay do in a world where we can realize the value of stable coins running on this public infrastructure?
Yeah, and actually, I mean, depending on when you edit and air this, I mean, I assume our stablecoin offering will be out. So we actually are about to launch USDC on ShakePay. And what makes it very unique of how ShakePay is offering USDC on the platform is USDC is not just an asset that you can just buy and sell on ShakePay. It's essentially just another rail. So we have US dollars on the platform, and USDC is in a way to deposit US dollars to the platform or withdraw US dollars from the platform. And then when it's on the platform, it's just US dollars. So you can take your US dollars, you can buy Canadian dollars, you can buy Bitcoin, you can buy Ethereum. And so it's basically the use of USDC here is what it's really for as a payment, as a payment vehicle. Um, so that's really exciting to come out. And I guess one thing, so that's sort of like our view of sort of stable coins today, and obviously USDC is probably the most prevalent. Like I think another feature that we haven't really talked about, but sort of related to the stablecoin uh, realm is at ShakePay, and it's been a something that we're continuing to look to expand. Is this was launched I think back in 2020, which is the ability to send funds from one ShakePay user to another. So every ShakePay user has something called a Shake tag, and you can send fiat or crypto from one user to another instantaneously, free. All you got to do is input their Shake tag and send them some money. And so you can see how something like that, as we continue to grow that, will continue to broaden the ability for us to like have instantaneous payments from one user to another, right? And how we can like leverage basically crypto to do that. Like it's that's sort of where we definitely see ShakePay sort of growing and expanding.
It's great to hear that this launch is coming, because it is a very tactical, novel, uh, yet impressive use case for stablecoins, right? US dollar accounts and the ability to move US dollars, send and receive US dollars, it's fairly limited part of the set of banking features that I would I would be offered in Canada. And it's gotten better now that RBC and TD and like they all have US institutions now, and some of them have targeted snowbirds and they've made it a little bit easier. But the point you're making is that we can hold US dollars on behalf of a customer. A customer can hold US dollars inside of Shakepay, but the US dollars that they hold are they can be Shakepay, and my user account at Shakepay can be addressed globally on this payment rail using this asset USDC. It's almost like you connected, it would be the equivalent of connecting Shakepay to the ACH network in the US, insofar as it's just another payment rail. I can use Interac, I can use stablecoins, I can use EFT, I can use Wire. It's just another payment rail fundamentally in
Yeah,
this
yeah,
experience.
that's
That's
exactly it.
great. Yeah, yeah. Which points to where we started the conversation, which is crypto as an ecosystem. I think struggles with its narrative because there are an infinite number of narratives for crypto, and two of the easiest categories to put them in is securities versus payments, and this is just a very clear payments use case, which I love. And honestly, I didn't know this was coming. Sometimes you would assume that maybe I would know because I'm friends with the Shakepay team, but I didn't know this was coming, and I'm very excited about it because it actually does solve a problem for me. And I'm sure, and you can tell me if I'm incorrect, but like I'm sure when I move from US dollars to Canadian dollars inside of Shakepay, that I will benefit from a better rate than I would at maybe an incumbent financial institution.
Oh yeah, 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 yeah.
Oh
We're
yeah.
providing some very tight spreads. That I mean, it's like it's not even like that's where the banks really take a lot of their margin.
Yes.
It's pretty crazy to see, to be honest. Because I just had to do that recently, where I was looking at the rates, and even Wise, like they're pricey. They're pricey, and I think we'll be a lot tighter than all of those platforms. I'm pretty excited about that.
And even if they weren't pricey, price is one component of this, trust is another component of this, but convenience is
It's
another
convenience, yeah.
component of this, right? Like there is something about using ShakePay that is more convenient for me than maybe using Wise, even if today a lot of the same functionality exists, with the exception of course, ShakePay being, sort of crypto led, if you will. But even like the Shake Tag thing, like my friends are on ShakePay, my friends are not on Wise, so there's just an element of convenience there that so it doesn't always need to be about price from my perspective, of course, but before we go, I think it would be kind of fair to open the point here too that like if ShakePay can handle USDC pay-ins and payouts, on behalf of users that want to use that rail. USDC is an approved settlement asset with Visa. ShakePay does issue a Visa card. Presumably, there's something you can do there at some point to reduce the cost to either the user or ShakePay of foreign exchange when I use my ShakePay card to sign up for a subscription that charges me in US dollars.
Yep. Yep. Yeah, no, definitely, definitely. And that's where we're hoping, like on the card as well, we've got a lot of exciting things coming out, in a little while here. That's just going to enhance the offering that we already have today. So yeah, and you're hitting sort of on one of those for sure.
it, if you were to offer a call to action for someone like myself or somebody that's like interested in this topic that lives at the intersection of fintech and crypto with us, like what should we be doing right now in order to create sort of meaningful change, just as individuals or as an industry? Like, what would you like to see happen over the next little bit here? Yeah.
Uh, so I think if I'm talking to a business, right, any really any size, like think about integrating stablecoins into your business, right? And I think even when we that messaging and that like as that happens, that's going to sort of continue to put additional, I'll call it pressure on the current framework that we have today on stablecoins and the way they're sort of like they're regulated right now in Canada. I think that's probably one. Two is, yeah, again, like I think as it's always important to continue to build the right infrastructure so Canadians can use stablecoins seamlessly. And I think that's what makes Shakepay offering very unique is that you don't need to be an expert to deposit USDC or withdraw it from Shakepay. It's pretty seamless. And so yeah, continue to build great products. And then I think lastly is just use like use your network. Continue to like if you have the ability, like speak to your politicians, speak to your the persons in your constituency, tell them these are important topics for you because for example, like you see, or maybe you're a business owner, right? You see the benefit of stablecoins basically you know take the interchange cost from 2.5% to like instantaneous pretty much. And so talk to them of like how you see the immense benefit of stablecoins. Like that is very impactful. And there are projects out there where they try to like the more we speak to people in government, like even just emails, that helps. So even emailing the people in your riding, like that actually does help, even though many people don't think it does. Um, so yeah, those would be the three things.
I hadn't considered that the simplicity of just saying to your member of parliament through an email, hey, by the way, I believe that this stuff is real. I believe that this stuff is not going away. And I believe that there's a significant opportunity here for Canadians. The next time somebody comes to speak with you about this, or the next time you're in the vicinity of somebody, just consider that, I sent you this email. And that can go a long way, right? To just open
Yeah.
people's mind, just open your mind a little bit. Um, because oftentimes, wherever you hear the word crypto, it's either, it's either followed by or preceded by AML, right? Money laundering, right? Because that's how a certain segment of the population thinks about it, because that's how they've been trained to think about it. Into, consider integrating stable coins into your business. I think the word integration is a really good one because it also just keeps us away from this conversation about stable coins as big C crypto, which typically for people equals like a volatile asset that somebody is expecting to appreciate. Integrate stable coins, build infrastructure. This is in the national interest. Thank you so much, Eric Richmond. It was great to see you, and I had a lot of fun.
Thanks for having me. It's fun.
All right, cheers.